Ever squint at your photos from a sunny day? Today we're fixing that. Discover how to capture stunning photos in direct sunlight, mastering the light and not fighting it. Yes, dear listener, today we're tackling one of photography's most common challenges, taking great photos in direct sunlight. Many photographers feel stuck battling harsh shadows and blown out highlights that turn vibrant scenes into high contrast headaches. The immediate answer, and your key to unlocking incredible sunny day photography, is this. Direct sunlight isn't always your enemy. It's a powerful light source that, when understood and creatively managed, can produce stunning, dramatic and impactful images. Yes, really. The secret lies in adapting your approach to the lighting conditions that you're working under. So instead of wishing for cloudy days, which is what I do here in England, well, I don't wish for them, they're sort of forced on me. So instead of wishing for cloudy days, learn to master the sun's intensity. This means embracing techniques like strategically placing your subject in open shade for beautiful diffused light, or cleverly using the sun as a backlight to create gorgeous room light and captivating silhouettes. I'm going to delve into essential camera settings like exposure compensation to balance highlights and shadows, and also how simple accessories like a reflector or diffuser can transform challenging light. I'm also going to explore why shooting in RAW is a must. You have to do it in harsh light conditions, and there will be people who challenge me, but that's fine, challenge away. And finally, how post-processing can help you recover vital detail. Yes, this episode will equip you with practical photography tips to confidently shoot in bright conditions, turning those frustrating, squint-inducing scenes into beautifully well-exposed photos. So get ready, dear listener, to see the sun as an opportunity and not a limitation, and capture stunning images every time. How utterly splendid. Okay then, good morning, good afternoon, or indeed good evening, wherever you are in the world, and whenever you're listening to episode 209 of the Photography Explained podcast. Taking great photos in direct sunlight, 5 tips for beating the harsh light. Yep, I came up with that one all by myself. So welcome to episode 209. I'm your host Rick, and in each episode I will try to explain one photographic thing to you in plain English in less than 27 minutes-ish, without the irrelevant details. Yes, really. Now, I know I said I was doing crop factors this episode, in the last episode, but I changed my mind. Who wants to know about crop factors? If you want me to cover crop factors, let me know. I don't really want to do it because between us, it's quite boring. Okay? It's important, of course it's important, but it's not the most interesting subject, is it? And I'm continuing the theme from the last episode where I talked about the photos I took on a holiday in some lovely bright sunny conditions. Right, so who am I? Well, I'm a professionally qualified photographer based in England, and I have a lifetime of photographic experience which I share with you in my splendid podcast. And yes, the format has changed. There's a lot more answery bit right up at the front because that's what I want to do. I want to answer the question first, and then I can go into it in more detail in the episodes. Okay, let's get into it. Understanding the problem, why direct sunlight is tricky for photos. When the sun's high and bright, it creates very hard light. Now, this isn't inherently bad, it just presents specific challenges for your camera and your subject, and these are high contrast, which is the most significant issue. Direct sunlight creates incredibly bright highlights and very dark, defined shadows. And your camera's dynamic range will struggle to capture detail in both extremes in one image capture. And that's going to give you either blown out highlights with pure whites with no detail, or shadows that are ruined with just blacks with no detail in them. Now, just to give this some context, my Canon 6D has a dynamic range of about 10 stops. The human eye has a dynamic range of about 20 stops. I'm saying about because there's so much more to this than that, but this gives you an idea. My Canon 6D, it's a full frame camera. It can capture about half of the range of lights and darks that I can see. So we're starting off from a bad position, aren't we? So bright sunlight, high contrast, it's a challenge. Other things we have to deal with. Squinting subjects. Yeah, people naturally squint or frown in bright sun, which isn't flattering for portraits. And if you're wearing sunglasses, you haven't got the eyes and the eye contact, so that doesn't work either. You also get harsh shadows on faces. Direct overhead sun, it can cast unflattering shadows under the eyes and the noses. And it it can give you a raccoon eyes effect. Yeah, that came up in the research. I've never heard of that one before, but once I'd come across that, I understood the point. Raccoon eyes effect, I like that. You also get unwanted glare and reflections, shiny surfaces, water, leaves, cars, glass, anything shiny can reflect direct light back at your lens, and that can cause lens flare, and it can reduce contrast. And if you think about this, if you got the sea and you got light reflecting off it, you haven't got the detail of the sea. Now, I covered this in the last episode on polarizing filters, where you can get rid of that glare effect. So I've covered some of that, so I'm not going to repeat myself here, but unwanted glare and reflections are a problem. Understanding these challenges is the first step to overcoming harsh light and taking well-exposed photos, even on the sunniest days. Right, immediate actions for beating harsh light. Well, don't just point and shoot. Stop and think. I talk about this a lot, stopping and thinking rather than just getting out there and taking photos without any consideration. First thing you can do is to seek open shade, which is your easiest win. Move your subject under a tree, beside a building, or any area of consistent open shade. Trees are great for this. This will give you lovely soft diffused light that is more flattering, and you get rid of those horrible shadows and contrasty bits. And there's no raccoon eyes. Next one, nice and simple. Turn your subjects back to the sun. Instead of having the sun hit the face directly, position your subject with the sun behind them. That gives you lovely backlighting, but you need to adjust the exposure to make sure that the face is correctly exposed. Or use fill-in flash. And then you can use a diffuser. So get a diffuser, hold it between the sun and your subject, and it's like a cloud coming over. It's diffusing the light, which makes a massive difference. So simple. You can even use white paper at a push if you want to, but it might need to be a big sheet. Diffusers are not expensive and they're dead easy to use. And these quick adjustments will immediately give you better photos. How utterly splendid. Okay, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on some of these things now. These are more detailed, actionable photography tips that will help you to consistently capture stunning photos in direct sunlight. Number 1, master the power of open shade. Yep, this is the simplest and most effective way to manage harsh light. Remove your subject from it entirely. I'll come on to buildings in a bit because you can't move them. So open shade is your friend. Open shade is an area that is shaded from direct sunlight but still open to the sky. So under a large tree, shade of a building, shade of anything. You can actually use umbrellas for shade. Yep, conventional rain umbrellas, they work just as well. And shade gives you diffused soft light. This gets rid of unflattering, harsh shadows and blown highlights. Your subject won't be squinting and skin tones will look more natural and flattering. And obviously, to find nice shaded areas, just walk around and look around. This is the whole point of my strategy for taking photos. Walking and looking are such important things before you take a photo. Walk around, look around, think, find a nice shady area that works for the photo that you're taking, and then check the background to make sure that you've got a background that you want, which might just mean you're moving around a bit. Okay, so that was tip 1. Tip 2, leverage backlighting for dramatic effects. Yes, really. Instead of fighting the sun, turn it into a creative tool. So backlighting involves placing your subject, whatever that might be. And I'm not just talking people here. It could be anything. It could be a building. It could be a car. It could be a tree. Anything. You put anything between you and the sun and you've got backlighting. It's great to try these things and just see what effects you get, because you might not like it, but you might love it. So when the sun's behind your subject, you can get this lovely rim light, which gives a nice glowing outline around a person's head or a building. Come to that. It's not just about people, like I say. And it separates things from the background, and it can give you depth and a dramatic, nice, lovely, even ethereal feel. So if we're going for the rim lighting effect, you need to get your exposure right. Of course you do. A meter reading will tend to give you an underexposed image. It'll be too dark. The subject matter, whatever it is, again, this isn't about people, this is about anything. The subject will be too dark. So you need to use something called exposure compensation, where you're making a conscious manual adjustment to the exposure that you've got. On my Canon 6D, it's a wheel on the back and I can just dial up or down the exposure. You're probably looking at 1 or 2 stops, depending on the subject and the range of lights and how bright the sun is and all that good stuff. But you can have a go, you can have a play, you could try 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops and see what works. So you're overexposing the scene, but your subject is properly exposed, and that makes the background, the sky, lovely and bright. So it's a specific effect you're after. But you can go the other way with silhouettes, can't you? If you want a more dramatic effect, you can expose for the bright background, underexposing your subject, and that gives you a lovely silhouette effect, which, again, it varies with what you're taking photographs of. Do you want a silhouette of a person? Possibly not. Do you want a silhouette of a tree? That can be an excellent photo. Do you want a silhouette of a building? Possibly. It's just something different. It's a way of using the light in a creative way. Another thing to mention, lens flare. When you're shooting into the sun, lens flare is a problem. That's where the sunlight is reflecting off the front lens element and it appears on your photo as a horrible bright flash of colour. You don't want it. You can remove them later, but we don't want to do that if we can avoid it being there in the first place, do we? So what we do is we use a lens hood to block stray light from hitting the front element. Now, I always use a lens hood, always, because for me, it's the best way to protect the front lens element. It's a physical barrier, so I never take a photo without the lens hood on. Even if it's cloudy, even if I'm inside, I really do always use a lens hood. So that's a great additional tip. You can use your hand as well to block light, and then you're getting into your coats, diffusers and other things. There are things that you can do. And also, moving so the sun is in a different plane to your camera lens. That can help prevent lens flare. So lens flare is something you need to be aware of, but it's manageable. The coating on modern lenses also helps reduce lens flare. That's one of the reasons for it. Not only is it protecting that front lens element, it's reducing lens flare as much as possible. But if you get your angles wrong, you'll get lens flare in a photo. Now, one more thing on lens flare. You might like it. I don't know, you might like it. So get some lens flare and have a look. It might be your thing, you don't know, do you? So backlighting is a powerful creative technique that can transform harsh light into striking photos. It really can. Okay, tip 3, not my strong suit this. Employ light modifiers, and what I'm talking about here is reflectors and diffusers. This is gear that can help us create shade where we haven't got any. Make your own shade. Yes, with gear we can create shade where there isn't any. How utterly splendid. These are simple, affordable lighting accessories that can make a huge difference. A reflector in photographic terms is a collapsible piece of gear. They collapse down so they can fit into a bag, but they expand out to be 300mm, 600mm, whatever, depends on the product. They expand out to be much bigger. And they come in different colours too. You've got silver, gold, white, black, and translucent. And what you do with them, dead simple, you use them to bounce sunlight back onto the subject. So let's use a person as an example. You use the reflector to bounce some of that sunlight back onto the person's face, and that fills in the harsh shadows. And the beauty of this is you're filling in the shadows using sunlight. No, you can't do this with a photograph of a building. Well, you'd need a big reflector, wouldn't you? So it's not something that I tend to do. But I do have some reflectors in my second bag, the bag of stuff that I've got that I still might need, but very rarely use. And you've got the different colours which offer, well, white gives you the softest, most natural light. Silver gives you a cooler one. Gold gives you a warmer tone. Again, it's not the kind of thing that I do, but just because I don't do it doesn't mean that you won't want to do it. Diffusers, yep, I have some of these as well, and I've used them in the past. These are held between the light source, which in this case is the sun, and your subject. And what you're getting in effect is a softbox effect. You're diffusing the harsh direct sunlight, creating soft, even light over your subject. Again, for people, works great. For a building, you need a big diffuser, don't you? And then you got fill flash, which, again, it's balancing out the flash. So you've got the bright background, but you can use flash to lighten your subject matter. But you've got to be mindful of reflections on shiny things, of course. But for photographing people, fill-in flash works an absolute treat. You're retaining the natural light around the subject, but you're boosting the light on the face. That's where you get really, really striking photos of people. Fill-in flash with diffusers on the flashes too. Don't take photos using a flash gun with just the bare head. I don't know why flashes aren't made with built-in diffusers. Maybe they are these days, because it's a couple of decades since I've used flash for any of my photography, because I don't need it anymore for the work that I do. But I have done. I've used fill-in flash before. I've had diffusers on and stuff like that. And the photos you get using a diffused flash are, well, the first time I did it, I looked at the photos I'd taken and I thought, wow, these look like they've been taken by a real photographer. Yeah, that's what I thought. They were amazing. So, fill flash, it's excellent. You expose for the ambient background light, and then you use your flash to boost the light on the subject. So, I'm not going to talk about that anymore because this really isn't my strong suit. If you want to know more about it, let me know, and I'll have to dig my flash out and remind myself how you get the exposure right. It's an amazing technique for taking photographs of people. With a building, you can get multiple flashes to illuminate the face of a building, and that can give you fantastic effects. But I've gone down a different road, thankfully, so I don't have. Well, I've got one flash gun now just in case, but I think it's with my polarizing filter somewhere because I can't remember where I put it. It must be in bag 2, which is the bag that goes in the boot of the car, but very rarely gets opened. Right, tip 4, optimize camera settings and also a bit of post-processing. Careful selection of camera settings and careful post-processing will help with the challenges we face with taking photos in bright sunlight. The first point I want to make here, shoot in RAW and not JPEG. RAW files contain more data than JPEGs, less so than in the past, granted, and some will argue that's not the case anymore, but that's what I do. And this extra data, it gives you more flexibility in post-processing. You can recover data in the shadows and the highlights which you might have lost. Exposure compensation, mentioned before, is a very simple process where you adjust the exposure, plus or minus, depending if your subject is too dark or too bright. It depends on the light, the direction of the light, and the contrast between your subject matter and the light around it. And one that's not on my script, which should be, because this is something I do all the time. How could I possibly forget this? Auto exposure bracketing. Let me give you a building specific example. Now, you might have noticed in this episode, I'm trying to broaden things out a bit from just what I do in photographing buildings. That's why I'm doing this, really. I'm trying to appeal to more people than just the people who do what I do. Or appeal to myself, come to that. So you take a photo of a room on a sunny day. You take a photo, you take a meter reading, and what you're going to get is the window's going to be blown out and the shadows, you're going to lose detail. If you take 3 photos, one for the correct exposure for the contents of the window, one the correct exposure for most of the room, and one the correct exposure for the shadows, what are you going to get? You're going to get 3 different photos with 3 different areas correctly exposed. Now, with auto exposure bracketing, you can do that by taking, say, 3 photos. So what I do is I take 1 photo, which is the correct exposure, 1 photo, 2 stops overexposed, 1 photo, 2 stops underexposed. And there's a camera setting in my Canon 6D, and I would imagine with all cameras, that allows me to do this with 1 press of the shutter button. I merge the photos together in Lightroom, and I have what is called an HDR image. Now, HDR isn't a bad thing. If you call it exposure compensation, it's not a bad thing. If you say you shoot HDR, the pitchforks are out for you, but they are pretty much the same thing. This is into the semantics of terminology here. But if you do use auto exposure bracketing, what you're doing is you're getting the correct exposure for different light levels. And what's wrong with that? Nothing is my answer. So that's the big bit missing from this section. And when you get on to processing, you can do all sorts to reduce the brightness in the highlights, and you can bring up the detail in the shadows. But if you've not got the exposure right, you haven't got the data, you can't do anything with it. So capturing the data in the first place is important. Going back to the dynamic range thing, this is in general terms. This isn't exact science. My Canon 6D has a 10-stop dynamic range. If I do 2 stops overexposed and 2 stops underexposed, I am, in theory, adding to the dynamic range by 4 stops. So my 10-stop dynamic range becomes 14 stops. That's getting me closer to what I can see with my eyes, which is 20 stops. Makes perfect sense to me, and it's fine to do. So you got the sliders where you could adjust things, and then you got local adjustments using brushes and filters and all that good stuff. I don't want to talk about that now. This is more one for another episode. But the point here is, it's a combination of things: where you position the subject relative to the light, how you take the photo, what your camera settings are, what gear you use, and how you do the processing. It's all those bits put together which help you to get the best photos you can in harsh light. Okay, tip 5, creative approaches, silhouettes, lens flare, and black and white. Yes, embrace silhouettes, dear listener. It's one to think, but you know what? I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do this because it sounds good to me, silhouettes. So when you got a situation where your subject is dark because the sun's behind, go more the other way and make them darker to get a more dramatic silhouette effect. Give it a go, whatever it is you're taking a photo of. Have a go, see what you can get. Intentional lens flare, I touched on this before. We don't want lens flare. Well, we might actually, so be aware of lens flare, have a go, see what you get. You might like it as an effect. And then there's black and white. Let's not forget black and white. I love black and white photos. See, harsh light, it naturally creates strong highlights and shadows, which gives us intense contrast, and this is perfect for black and white photography. We're losing the emphasis on the colours to create the photo. It's the range of tones, how they look. So black and white is a really good thing to do. And if you can take photos with the mindset, I'm going to convert them to black and white later, good on you, you're better than me. Again, now I'm talking about it, it's something I quite fancy going back to, having a go at some black and white, because what I used to do back in the day, every time I did photos, I'd do a black and white version, and there was some really good stuff in there. I got some really different stuff, so worth looking at. Okay, other things we can do, well, we can look for patterns and textures in buildings and walls. That harsh, bright light at a certain angle, it can emphasize textures and patterns and lines, so it's something to think about, and we're getting a bit more artistic now and abstract and almost like graphic designy, aren't we? But if you think about it, I'm going back to buildings because that's what I do. If you're photographing a building and the sun is at an angle, you're going to get shadows in, say, the brick, and that's going to emphasize that feature. It works a treat. So harsh sunlight is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a no-no for taking photos. That was it. Blimey, that was a lot, wasn't it? Let's get on to what if I use a phone to take photos? Well, the same applies really. All the things I said apply. Are you going to use a diffuser with a phone? Are you going to use a reflector? It's unlikely, isn't it? One thing about phones, you'll have software in there that will help you cope with these things. Call it HDR, call it whatever it is. They're doing the same thing. They're capturing more of the lights than the darks. And the software in phones is so clever, so the computational side of things will help you get better photos in harsh light. So, as ever, if you're not sure, have a go and see what you get. And with a phone, if you got rubbish, delete it. You've not lost anything, have you? If you want to take a photo in shade, find some shade. But you're not going to get a lens hood on a phone, are you? So, there is a special piece of equipment you can use in lieu of a lens hood on a phone. It's your hand. Just putting your hand between the sun and your camera lens can make a massive difference. Right, there you have it. The sun, that big bright ball of free light in the sky. It doesn't have to be your photographic nemesis. No, it doesn't. By understanding the nature of harsh light and consistently applying these actionable shooting techniques, you will get better photos in harsh light. Rather than taking the approach, I'm not going to take photos because it's noonish and the sun's in its highest position and the shadows are the harshest, rather than taking that approach, why not treat this as a challenge to get some great photos by doing some of the things that I've talked about? Get out there and take photos. The only way you're going to learn how to take better photos is to go out and take photos. What do? Well, I photograph buildings and nice places, and buildings in nice places. Yes, I've got a few reflectors which I've used when I'm photographing people, but I don't photograph people anymore, so I don't use them. Oh, here's a note in my script. That's why they're in the loft. That's where they are. They're in the box in the loft that I'd forgotten about. That's my gear that I'm not going to throw away that I might use one day box. I used to have a load of boxes, but I'm just down to that now. I used to avoid taking photos around midday, but I don't always get a choice of when I take photos. If I'm taking photos of a building for a client, I might have a fixed period of time, say from 10 till 12. That's what I've got. That's all I have to deal with, so I am not able to just go for the nice, lovely directional light. And that'll be the case for a lot of people. We can't all just take photos at sunrise and sunset. And if you read lots of things about photography, they will say to you, don't take photos at noon. Life isn't like that. Life doesn't help us that way. So we have to deal with what we've got, which is why this is so important. So, for all you folks who say you should never take photos at midday, I say nonsense. For most of us, this is just not an option. Use the best light you can, and if you can take photos not at midday, I'm not saying don't do that, but if your only choice is midday, for example, don't make that a barrier. Find out how to get the best that you can. And again, I want to pick up on this one again because this is important. I always use a lens hood every time I take photos. It's always on my lens. It reverses round so it faces the camera, but any time I take a photo, the lens hood will be back the other way, so it's protecting that front lens element. I don't use protector filters anymore. Not saying you shouldn't, I don't know how careful you are. I use a lens hood to protect my front lens element, and it's worked for me for many years. Okay then. Oh yeah, sorry, one last thing. Let's not forget circular polarizing filters and neutral density filters, which I covered in the last 2 episodes. See, there is some thought to this, there is some logic. Okay, next episode. How to get sharp photos every time beyond just focusing. Yep, unless somebody gets in touch and says, can you do this? So if you don't want me to do that, get in touch with an alternative title for me. Sharp photos is an important subject for all of us, of course it is. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss this episode. Okay, a quick plug for me and what I do. Well, why not, eh? If I can't plug myself on my own podcast, where can I? So you found the podcast, check out the podcast website, photographyexplainedpodcast.com, and also my other photography website, rickmcavoyphotography.com, where you'll find lots of good stuff and information on my course, How to Become a Real Estate Photographer. And you can also find me on YouTube talking about my podcast and my blog, all that good stuff. Okay, moving on. Get an email from me. If you want a weekly email from me, fill in the box on any of my websites, and every Friday you'll read what I'm thinking about photography related. And that is enough of the self-promotion. Okay, ask me a question. If you got a question you want me to answer, if you don't want me to do crop factors, or whatever it was I said before, email me, sales@rickmcavoyphotography.co.uk. And you can text from the podcast feed. How utterly splendid. Whichever way you get in touch, it's always lovely to hear from you, my dear listeners. Right, this episode was brought to you by, wait for it, a cheese and pickle sandwich which I consumed before settling down in my homemade acoustically cushioned recording emporium. I've been Rick McAvoy. Thanks again very much for listening to my small but perfectly formed podcast, it says here, and for giving me 27 minutes of your valuable time. Now, I reckon this episode will be about, I don't know, 27, 28 minutes long, after I've edited out the mistakes and the other bad stuff and the gaps where I've had to answer the door for deliveries. Thanks for listening. Take care. Stay safe. Cheers from me, Rick.